All right, all right. Shalom, shalom. This is Moray Tukoa Malachi, and we will be dealing with today something that was brought up in one of the groups that we have. Some people wanted some information on the Shabbat, and so we decided to do a quick video. This is kind of quick, so we put the information together. Now, in this video, I have some actual videos that's going to play. Like I said, I didn't have time to try to get all those scriptures together. I could have, but this would have made this quick teaching very long if I would have put in there. So the videos, when you get to the video part, you'll see that they're in like 10-minute segments, and it's it'll be quicker that way. You'll see all the scriptures that pertain to what I'm saying. But I wanted to start this off and give a quick breakdown on why we honor the Sabbath day as the rest. And in order to explain that, we got to go back and see when does a day begin. Because to be honest, I initially went with from evening to evening. But some of the brothers that's in the assembly and ministry, they put out some challenges, and we looked at it, we studied it, and we was able to see that we had to go back and rediscover that. And we're going to give you as far as the understanding that we have now, line upon line, precept upon precept. You know how we do. And we'll probably be rolling out things like this for those that are partnering with us. That, we'll probably have a specific email for you guys if you have questions, and we'll try to cater some of the weekly lessons or fly lessons that we do on the fly according to the questions that you might have. Just as an extra incentive for being a partner with the ministry. This is not going to be the teaching on honoring the Shabbat, but this will be the teaching on when do we reckon the Shabbat and when does a day start. So let's get into it. All right, so when we look at the scripture in Bereshit chapter 1, verse 1, and we're just going to read it and then we'll break it down. It says, "In the beginning, Elohim created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form, it was void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Ruach of our Elohim moved upon the face of the water. And Yah said, let there be light." Boy, that's important. Verse 3. With nothing happening, and then watch what he put in a cycle, or he established when he said, let there be light, and there was light. And God seen the light that he created and said that it was good. Then he did some after this. Yah divided the light from the darkness. And Yah called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Seems simple enough. When you look at that at first glance, it seems simple enough that, evening and morning, the first day. But let's keep looking. Let's look a little deeper. Let's read that one more time. And let's break it down some more. It says, in the beginning, Yah created the heaven and the earth. Watch this, verse 2. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness, and we're going to look darkness up, was upon the face of the deep. And the Ruach of Yah moved on the face of the water. So we're saying right here, the darkness was upon the earth. It was without form. So this is not considered a day or a night right now. Something has to be established. Something has to be put in motion for a day to begin. And we're going to see that in a minute. Verse 3. We see the darkness now. Now watch verse 3. And Elohim, which is Yah, or Elohim, said, let there be light. And there was light. So when he spoke that, there was a beginning of something. Before then, it was just void. But when he spoke, let there be light, he established something. He put something in motion. He put a cycle in motion by speaking it forth. Verse 4. And Yah saw what he spoke. He saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So he divided the light from the darkness at this point, but nothing happened before he said, let there be light. He put it in motion. And when y'all, verse 5, and when y'all called the light day, so he established that light, he called that light, and then he looked at that light, seen it was good, and called that light day. And then he looked at the darkness, which he divided from it, and called that night. But look how it's structured. First day, then night, and evening, and morning was the first day. So we see he spoke some into existence. That's when the day began. Then it was preceded by night. Evening and morning was the first day. Now we're going to break this down even more. I hope you're following me. So let's go do a word study, and let's look at the Strong's, or look in the concordance, and let's see what these words. So this is Strong's number 2822, Chazak. Definition of that is darkness and obscurity. Darkness, obscurity. So when we see in verse 2, they said it was void, it was without form, and it was void, and darkness. So we see obscurity. That's what that means. Darkness. Notice it didn't say the earth was without form and void and night. It said darkness. Like, watch this. Now let's look up evening. Strong's number 86153, Ereb. And Ereb means evening, night, or sunset. Evening or sunset. Now you look up the root of that. Strong's 86150, Arab, and it means to become evening, to grow dark, to become evening, growing dark. So this is the time from the afternoon towards the evening, where it begins, the sun going down, and it begins to grow dark. When the sun is going down, that period of time is called evening. Very important to remember. Let's look at the next word. Strong's H3915, Layil. Again, Layil is night. And night means night as opposed to day. So the opposite of day, of gloom, a protective, a shadow, a twist away from light, night. It can be figuratively used at adversity. Now let's look at day. So we're looking at night, we looked at darkness, we looked at evening. Let's look at day. Day is Strong's H3117, which means yom. That can be a day, a time period, a year. It can be day as opposed to night, like a 12-hour period, and also day can be a 24-hour period. It's a division of time, a working day or a day's journey. A day's journey is from sunrise to sunset. A working day, you will see, is from sunrise to sunset. So yom can be a number of things. It can be a 12-hour period of the daylight. It can be a 24-hour period, time of year. So the context shows us what definition in yom to use. Let's keep moving. Now, let's look at Strong's 81242, Boker. Boker is morning, when it says the evening and the morning. So let's look at what morning means. It's Boker in Hebrew. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm doing this real late at night. But morning, it means morning. It means break of day. Morning, the end of night, the coming of daylight, the coming of sunrise, the beginning of the day, the bright joy after the night distress. So morning is boker, and it's meaning when the sun is beginning to rise, you twisting away from night, you coming into daylight. The time period from you growing from night and flowing into daylight. Let's look at evening again. Evening is Arab, and you look the root word up, it means to grow dark. The process of going from daylight to darkness, in between that time, growing dark. So hopefully we got those definitions. Now let's go back and visit this with that in our mind. In the beginning, Yah created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness, which deep obscurity, was upon the face of the deep. And the Ruach of Yah moved upon the face of the waters. And Yah said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. So what did he use to divide the light from the darkness? Again, he put some in motion when he said, let there be light. That was the beginning of something. Without the light, a day could not be established. He had to say, let there be light first, because before then it was void, it was nothing. But when he said, let there be light, that initiated a start, a beginning of something. Verse 4, and God saw the light, made it good. And what he did, he divided the light from the darkness. What did he use to divide the day and the night, which was the evening and the morning? And it's going to make sense when you break it down. Verse 5. And God called the light day, which is Yom. And the darkness he called night. And the evening, which is to grow dark. And the morning, which is to grow light, the first day. So right here we see light. We see day, which is Yom, which can be a 12-hour period, because following that is night. So this has to be the 12-hour period, this definition of Yom, because of the context. And the darkness he called night, which is opposed to the day, according to the Lael's definition. And the evening, which means, the root word is Arab, means to grow dark. And the morning, which is to grow light, or the first day. Now let's break this down again. God called the light Yom, which was opposed to the night. And the darkness he called night, which was opposed to the day. And it grew dark, and then it grew light. Day 1, the first day. So to look at this again, God called the light Yom, and the darkness he called night. And it began to grow dark, because that's the meaning of evening. It began to grow dark, and then it began to grow light, which was the first day. So when you break this down, even when you look at it in the Hebrew, when you break it completely down and get the full understanding of it, you are able to see that there first must be day, which is the light, evening, night, poker, which is morning. So your day, your evening, which is begin to grow dark, your nightfall, which is after evening, and then when the sun is getting ready to come up, that's your morning, and then you have a 24-hour period, which is a day. Because remember that this whole thing was established by saying, let there be light. He said, let there be light. That set something in motion. It made it begin then. He called the light day. The darkness he called night. He divided them. So this is how we got the understanding of, when you look at the definition of evening and morning. Evening means to grow dark. Morning means to grow light. So verse 5 again, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and then it grew dark, and then it grew light the first day, day 1. Let's keep proving that. Verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and in the evening and the morning was the first day. Now we understand we can't just take evening and morning. It can't be a day. Our day does not consist of just evenings and mornings. So we can't look at this scripture and just say, let's go back. We can't look at this scripture and just say, verse 5, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and evening and morning the first day. We can't take that scripture, evening and morning, by itself and make that a day. So that's why you have to put everything in its proper context, and then you get the full understanding. When you look at Yom, Yom can also mean a 24-hour period, and we spoke that. So you have your day, you have your evening, you have your night, you have your morning, 24-hour period of a day. It must have that let there be light, which is day. He separated the light, made the evening, and then the night, and then the morning. And if you notice, throughout that period, day is separated or divided from night. You have day, the separator is evening. Then you have night, the separator is morning. He divided the day from the night. Hope that makes sense. Even John 11:9 says, Yahushua answered, are there not 12 hours in what? A day. Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. So we're supposed to be children of the light, children of the day, walking in the day. So why would we not be called, if it began at nighttime, why would we not be called children of the night? If that starts your day. Let's keep going. Now, I want you to notice this pattern. Remember we said, it started off when he said, let there be light, that initiated the start of the day. That's when he separated the light from the darkness. And he called the day, the light day and the darkness night. Then it began to grow evening and would grow morning. That was the first day. Now let's watch this pattern. Verse 6. And Yah said, let the firmament in the midst of the waters, let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which he were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, which also. And Yah called the firmament heaven, and evening and morning was the second day. So he did their work, and then there were evening, and then there was morning, the second day. After morning watch, he start back at verse 9. He's working again. Verse 9, he's working again. After the evening and the morning period, it starts a new day, and he's working again. He worked on the land. I just paraphrase this, y'all. You can go read the whole thing yourself. But he worked on the land in the daytime during the 12-hour period. And we'll see what Messiah said to agree with that. And then verse 13, when he got done working, the evening came and the morning came, and there was the third day. After the morning, there was the third day, and then he's back to working again in verse 14. He's working on the sun, the moon, and the stars. And the evening and the morning, the fourth day. After the fourth day, he's up and working again. It says, and Elohim made two great lights. Now watch this. He made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also, and he placed the expanse of them in the heavens. Why would Yah start the day with the lesser light? If he made two great lights, the greater one, which is shining with the most light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, why would he start with a lesser light? Why would the beginning of your day start with the moon rather than the sun? He will start with the greater light that rules the day, and then allow the lesser light to rule the night. But watch this. The evening and the morning. So as you can see, God went right back to work. After that fourth day, he went right back to work at the evening and the morning, and he started creating the waters and the sea creatures. And then there was evening, and then there was morning the fifth day. And after the morning, well, he back to work again on the land creatures and mankind. He made mankind. And verse 31, God saw that everything that he made, and behold, it was good. Watch this. The evening and the morning, the sixth day. Now notice, every time he's working, he's only working during the day. He's not working in the evening. He does not work in the evening. You can't find no scripture in Genesis Bereshit 1 telling the creation story saying that he was working in the evening. He worked in the morning, the 12-hour period. Then evening came, he stopped working. Then morning came. Then that next day, he's working again. Yeah, excuse me. Baby crying. Well, okay, he's back to working again. Now watch what he does on this seventh day. which is going to be amazing. Because all the other days, he started back working. But now the sixth day then came, the evening and the morning. So he really supposed to pick back up on the seventh day, the 12-hour period, and work. But he establishes something after the sixth day, evening and morning. We see all the way from the first when he said, let there be light, and he created even in the morning. Even in the morning, then he working. Even in the morning, then he working. Even in the morning, all the way to the sixth day. Now we get into the seventh 12-hour period. The seventh 12-hour period, and watch what he does. Now remember, during the nights of all these other periods, he wasn't working. It's only during the day, from sunrise to sunset, the 12-hour period. But he's finna get to the seventh day when he's supposed to be working, and watch what he does to that day period. This is when he established the Shabbat Yom. The Shabbat Yom. Watch what he says, because this is after the evening and the morning of the sixth day. He's supposed to be working on this day, but watch what he does. Thus the heaven and the earth was finished, and all the hosts therein. And on the seventh day, Yah ended his work. Wait a minute, he's not working now. He ended his work, which he had made, and he rested during the 7-day 12-hour period from all his work which he had made. Now he did something distinctly different on this day period. Now he's resting and not working, and God and Elohim blessed that seventh day, and he sanctified it, because therein he rested from all his work which he had created and made. And these are the generations, or the genealogy of the heavens and the earth, when they were created in the day that the Most High made the earth and the heavens. Notice during this 12-hour period, only on the seventh day is when he didn't work. He stopped working from sunrise to sunset. All the other evenings, he wasn't working anyway. He was only working when that sun rose. He started working. But when it got to the seventh day, after the evening and the morning, after it grew dark and then it grew back light, on that seventh day, he stopped everything, and he sanctified this 12-hour period. You can't get around that. He sanctified this 12-hour period, which he's supposed to be working, the pattern that he set from the beginning. Notice he was only working during the 12-hour periods, and then he sanctified this period, and he rested on this period. I hope that's clear. I mean, to me, you can't get no clearer than that. That's clear right there. And let's back this up. Let's back this up with Yahushua or Yahusha and the apostles. Watch the language they're used when they bringing a revelation or bringing allusions to creation. Apostles speak of the connected with the day. Watch this. John 8:12. When Yahusha spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follow me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. John 9:4. While it is daytime, we must do the works of him who sent us. Because night is coming when no man is working. You can see from the beginning when nobody working at night. In Israel, nobody was working at night anyway. So John 9, while it is day, this is Messiah talking. While it's daytime, the 12-hour period, we must do the works of him, just like our Father was doing the works in creation. Night has come when no man will work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. He's that beginning light that was spoken when it said, let there be light. John 12:40 says, I have come into the world as light, as day, as yom, so that no one who believes in me should remain in darkness. Why he's always putting this emphasis on light first and not darkness? Because the darkness does not precede the light. The darkness does not start. The darkness don't initiate anything. The only thing that initiate anything is light. It's just the same way when you walk into a dark room, you initiate that room by turning the light on. That's when everything happened after you flick that switch and turn that light on. Everything is powered and everything is moving. The darkness doesn't start anything. John 11:9-10. And Yahusha answered, Are there not 12 hours of daylight? If anyone walks in the daytime, he will not stumble because he sees by the light of this world. Now you see all the allusions here that's alluding to what happened in creation, further verifying this truth of what we're saying. 1 Thessalonians 5:5-6. For you are all sons of light and sons of what? Not the night, but sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or to darkness. So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us remain awake and sober. For those who sleep at night. Look, no work is getting done at night. And those who get drunk at night. That's when all the labor stops. Romans 13:12. The night is nearly over. The day is drawn near. So let us lay aside the deeds of darkness and put on the armor of light. And let us behave decently as in the daytime, because in the daytime is when we are working and we doing all our stuff. At nighttime is when all the bad deeds of darkness is happening. Ephesians 5:8. For we were sometimes in darkness, but now we are what? We are of the light in the Most High. We walk as children of the, not night, but children of the light. See, this helps validify what we're saying here. And this is why a day initiates and starts at sunrise. That's when the day starts. At that, let there be light, showing a renewing of the day. A day cannot be renewed at nighttime. That's just like starting your year in the bed of winter. It only makes sense to start your year during the springtime when everything is being new again, being rebuilt, being reborn. The same thing as a day when light comes, it's being rebuilt, it's being reborn, it's giving you a sign of a new day. This is why they sang the song that weeping may endure for a night, but what come in the morning? Joy is coming in the morning, because what? It's going to initiate a new day. Now, right here, we're going to give you, this is the videos I was telling you about. We're going to allow some of these to play because it got scriptures upon scriptures to give you a better understanding, or just to detail what I just said.
As we continue through Scripture, we find many narratives that define a 24-hour day beginning in the morning. The following are some of the most straightforward. Genesis chapter 1 verse 16. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. Please note, why would Yahweh start a day with a lesser light? Genesis chapter 1 verse 18. And to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. Note the order: day, night, light, darkness. Genesis chapter 19 verse 33 to 34. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he was not aware of it when she lay down or when she arose. And it came to be on the next day that the firstborn said to the younger, See, I lay with my father last night. Note, the next day followed the night. Exodus chapter 10 verse 13. And Moshe stretched out his rod over the land of Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. Morning came, and the east wind brought the locusts. Note that that day belongs to that night, then the morning came. Exodus chapter 16 verse 22 to 27. And it came to be on the sixth day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe, and he said to them, This is what Yahweh has said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath, kadosh to Yahweh. That which you bake, bake, and that which you cook, cook. and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep until morning. And they laid it up till morning, as Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. And Moshe said, Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is the Shabbat, there is none. And it came to be that some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. Note that Yahweh said, Tomorrow was Shabbat. Then morning comes, and Moshe said, Eat it today, for today is a Shabbat. Exodus chapter 18, verse 13. And it came to be, on the next day, that Moshe sat to rightly rule the people, and the people stood before Moshe from morning until evening. Note that the next day starts in the morning. Exodus chapter 32, verse 5 and 6. And Aaron saw and built an altar before it, and Aaron called out and said, Tomorrow is a festival to Yahweh. And they rose early on the next day, and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Note that Aaron said tomorrow is a festival, and the next day they rose early. You don't rise at night. Leviticus chapter 6, verse 20. This is the offering of Aaron and his sons, which they bring near to Yahweh, beginning on the day when he is anointed. 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a daily grain offering, half of it in the morning, and half of it at night. Note that the offering was to be brought to Yahweh in the morning, the beginning of the day. Leviticus chapter 7, verse 15. As for the flesh of the slaughtering of his peace offering for thanksgiving, it is eaten the same day it is offered. He does not leave any of it until morning. Here's the question. How can you eat your peace offering the same day and not leave any of it until morning if your day starts at night? Numbers chapter 11, verse 32. And the people were up all that day, and all that night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who had least gathered 10 omers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. Note again that that day belongs to that night, then the next day comes. Joshua chapter 7, verse 6 to 13. And Joshua tore his garments, and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of Yahweh until evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. And Yahweh said to Joshua, Rise up, why are you lying on your face? Rise up, kadosh the people, and you shall say, Kadosh yourselves for tomorrow, because thus said Yahweh Elohim of Israel, that which is under the ban is in your midst. Note that it was already evening when Yahweh told Joshua to kadosh themselves for tomorrow, so the day cannot begin in the evening. Judges chapter 19, verse 9. And the man arose to go, he and his concubine and his servant. But his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said to him, See, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night, see the day is coming to an end. Stay here and let your heart be glad, and you shall rise early tomorrow for your journey, and you shall go to your tent. Note, rising early tomorrow implies the start of the day being morning. You will never see the words in Scripture, early at night. Samuel chapter 9, verse 19 to 26. And Shemuel answered Shaul and said, I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, where you shall eat with me today. And tomorrow I shall let you go, and make known to you all that is in your heart. And they rose early, and it came to be about the dawning of the day that Shemuel called to Shaul on the roof, saying, Rise, so that I send you on your way. Note that rising early at the dawning of the day again equates the start of the day being in the morning. 1 Samuel chapter 19, verse 10 to 11. And Shaul sought to smite the spear through David and into the wall, but he slipped away from the presence of Shaul, so he smote the spear into the wall. And David fled and escaped that night. And Shaul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, and to put him to death in the morning. And Michal, David's wife, informed him, saying, If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you are put to death. Note that it was already night when Michal told David to flee in the morning, for tomorrow he was to be killed, so a day cannot begin at evening. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verse 8 to 19. And Joel disguised himself and put on other garments and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, Please divine for me and bring up for me the one I shall name. So he said, Bring up Shemuel for me. Then Shemuel said, Why do you ask me, seeing Yahweh has turned aside from you and has become your enemy? Further, Yahweh also gives Israel with you into the hand of the Pelishites. And tomorrow you and your sons are with me. Yahweh also gives the army of Israel into the hand of the Pelishites. Note that if Shaul came at night and they were to fight with the Philistines tomorrow, how could the day begin at night? 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 17. And David smote them from twilight until evening of the next day, and none of them escaped, except 400 young men who rode on camels and fled. Note that if a day were from evening to evening, the scriptures would not have to read the next day. 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 13 to 15. Gad then came to David and informed him, and he said to him, Should 7 years of scarcity of food come to you in your land? Or would you flee 3 months before your enemies, while they pursue you? Or should there be 3 days plague in your land? Now know and see what answer I take back to him who sent me. And David said to Gad, I am in great trouble. Please let us fall into the hand of Yahweh, for his compassion is great. But do not let me fall into the hand of a man. And Yahweh sent a plague upon Israel from the morning till the appointed time. And from Dan to Beersheba, 70,000 men of the people died. Note that the 3-day plague started in the morning, not at night. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22. The kindnesses of Yahweh, for we have not been consumed, for his compassions have not ended. They are new every morning. Great is your trustworthiness. Note that new every morning, because morning is a new day. Jonah chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. And Yahweh Elohim appointed a plant and made it come up over Jonah to be a shade for his head to deliver him from his discomfort. And Jonah greatly rejoiced over the plant. But as morning dawned the next day, Elohim appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. Note that a morning starts the next day. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 7. And it shall be one day which is known to Yahweh, neither day nor night, but at evening time there shall be light. Note, a 24-hour day is mentioned here, with the day preceding the night.
Now we come to the renewed covenant. Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. Now after the Shabbat, toward dawn, on one of the Shabbatot, Miriam from Magdala and the other Miriam came to see the tomb. Note in all these examples, the Shabbat ended at dawn. Mark chapter 16, verse 2 reads, And very early on one of the Shabbatot they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. Luke chapter 24, verse 1. And on one of the Shabbatot, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. Note that the account given in John is the only one that disagrees with these 3 witnesses. John chapter 20, verse 1 reads, And on one of the Shabbatot, Miriam from Magdala came early to the tomb while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. The fact that 1 out of 4 disagrees means the translation of still dark may need to be examined. The Greek word skotia, Strong's number 4653, primarily means dim. John chapter 6, verse 16 to 22. And when evening came, his talmidim went down to the sea and entered into the boat. They were going over the sea toward Capharnaum, and it had already become dark. And Yeshua had not yet come to them, and the sea was rising because a great wind was blowing. When they had rowed about 5 or 6 kilometers, they saw Yeshua walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were afraid. And he said to them, It is I, do not be afraid. They wished therefore to take him into the boat, and at once the boat was at the land where they were going. On the next day, the story continues. Note, this is straightforward. It was already dark at night when these things took place. Then the next day occurs. Acts chapter 4 verse 3. And they arrested them and put them in jail until the next day, for it was already evening. Note again, it was dark, then the next day. Acts chapter 16 verse 9 to 11. And in the night a vision appeared to Shaul. A man of Macedonia was standing, begging him and saying, Come over to Macedonia and help us. And when he saw the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Master had called us to bring the good news to them. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course from Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis. Note that the next day follows the night yet again. Acts chapter 23, verse 31 and 32. So the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Shaul and brought him by night to Antipatris. And on the next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. Again, the next day follows the night. On top of all these scriptural accounts, having the night as the first part of the day seems to be a reversal of many of Yeshua's parables, which he described himself to us as the light of the world, John 8:12, John 9:5, John 12:46, etc. We should walk in the light and not in darkness, John 8:12, John 11:9-10, John 12:35, John 9 verse 4, etc. Many of the New Covenant letters likewise use similar parables. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5:5 we read, You are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night nor of darkness. See also Romans 13:12-13, Ephesians 5 verse 8, 1 Thessalonians 5 verse 7-8. Why start a day when we all sleep? With so many scriptural references defining the day and when it begins, one wonders what compels some to hold the traditions of the evening to evening Shabbat. To be fair, there are a couple of references that can cause confusion if taken out of context. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 26 and 32. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, On the 10th day of the 7th month is the day of atonement. It shall be a Kodesh gathering for you, and you shall afflict your beings, and shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And you do no work on that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahweh Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. And any being who does any work on that same day, that being I shall destroy from the midst of his people. You do no work, a law forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. It is a Shabbat of rest to you, and you shall afflict your beings on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening you observe your Shabbat. It is quite clear in the context of this law that the Sabbath for the Day of Atonement differs from other Sabbaths, in that Yahweh specified this particular high Sabbath to be kept from evening to evening. Notice that Yahweh makes it clear by numbering the days that the Day of Atonement is on the 10th day, but the fast commences on the 9th day at evening. Why would Yahweh command us to start the fast on the 9th day at evening if the 10th day started at the evening anyhow? It also makes sense to keep this fast this way, as some children may find it difficult waking, having not eaten at all, to fast through the day and then another night, a total of 72 hours. Another exception is the night of the Passover in which Yahweh led his people out of Egypt. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 5. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, is the Pesach to Yahweh. One glaring problem of the evening to evening observance is that it is impossible to celebrate your Passover on the evening of the 14th and eat your celebration meal that night. If your day starts in the evening, then celebrate it at night, then you have passed into the 15th according to an evening to evening reckoning. Exodus 12 verse 6 reads, And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then all the assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it between the evenings, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the 2 doorposts and on the lintel of the houses where they eat it, and they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Note, this whole festival takes place on the one day of the 14th, starting between the evenings and continuing that night. Some express difficulty in correlating the morning-to-morning reckoning with the Passover, yet the timing of this important festival is not defining when a day starts or ends. Yahweh simply wants us to honor the feast on that night of the 14th because that is the time He led His people out of Mitzrayim. Deuteronomy 16:1. Guard the month of Aviv and perform the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Aviv Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. Deuteronomy 16:6. You slaughter the Pesach in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. The Feast of Unleavened Bread follows on from the Passover, and we are also commanded to remove leaven from our homes that night. Exodus chapter 12 verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month in the evening. Something to take into account. If someone keeps Passover at the beginning of the 14th, the end of the 13th, they sit with 8 days of unleavened bread, where the command is clear to eat unleavened bread from the eating of the Pesach for 7 days. Exodus 12:15, verse 19, 13 verse 6 and 7, 23 verse 15, 34 verse 18, Leviticus 23 verse 6, Numbers 28 verse 17. Most importantly, Deuteronomy 16 verse 2 to 3. You shall slaughter the Pesach to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put His name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction. Note that this suggests that Passover is the start of the 7-day unleavened bread period, which is a continuous 7-day period and not an 8-day period. The festival of unleavened bread simply cannot begin at sundown after the Passover, as Scripture commands the leftovers to be burnt before morning, which involves kindling a fire, something forbidden. Another apparent anomaly is Nehemiah chapter 13 verse 18 to 21. Did not your fathers do the same, so that our Elohim brought all this evil on us and on this city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Shabbat. And it came to be, at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Shabbat, that I commanded the gates to be shut, and commanded that they should not be opened till after the Shabbat. And I stationed some of my servants at the gates, so that no burdens would be brought in on the Shabbat day. And the merchants and sellers of all kinds of wares spent the night outside Jerusalem once or twice. And I warned them and said to them, Why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I lay hands on you. From that time on they came no more on the Shabbat. As it began to be dark before the Shabbat, could infer that Sabbath starts when the sun goes down, but does not have to be the case. Against the weight of all other Scripture, it would be foolish to base your Sabbath on this one verse. In fact, it was customary to close the gates at night, and earlier in Nehemiah we see why they were closing the gates. Nehemiah chapter 7 verse 3 records, And I said to them, Let not the gates of Jerusalem be opened until the sun is hot. And while they are standing by, let them shut the doors and bolt them, and appoint guards from among the inhabitants of Jerusalem, each at his post, and each in front of his own house. Nehemiah had ordered them to shut the gates at night anyhow, and were not to be opened until the sun was hot. And as we see from the context of the Scripture, Nehemiah did not want the Sabbath profaned by merchants carrying in their wares and selling them on the day of rest. The merchants undoubtedly traveled on the 6th day and arrived toward the end of the day, so Nehemiah simply shut the gates on them. Notice also in the text, Why do you spend the night around the wall? If you do so again, I lay hands on you. Laying hands on someone, obviously forcefully, is not something one would do on the Sabbath, which tends to infer that the evening they arrived was not when the Sabbath commenced. There are also a great number of scriptures that declare uncleanness till evening, and certain events taking place before evening that could add to the error of assumption that a day starts in the evening. None of these scriptures actually state this, and it is common sense to be made clean at evening, so that persons may come into the camp to spend the night, as it was unlawful for an unclean person to come into the camp. More importantly, if the next day were a Sabbath, an individual would not be able to participate in any Kodesh assembly and would have to wait for the next evening. Some see evidence that this is how the Pharisees, instituting an evening to evening day, created a fence law around this. It was for this reason that dead bodies were removed before evening. See Joshua chapter 8 verse 29 and Mark 15 verse 42, and that it was commanded in the Torah, Deuteronomy 21 verse 23, but not because it was the start of a new day. Some may use the excuse that starting the day in the morning is based on sun worship, but this is an invalid argument, and the same can be said about evening start being based on moon worship, since moon worship is equally as ancient as sun worship. In fact, looking at many historical commentaries, it appears that the Israelites inherited lunar observance from the Babylonians, who revered the moon above the sun, and that it was more mysterious at night. It is also interesting to note that the phrase night and day appears 13 times in Scripture, yet the phrase day and night appears 28 times, twice as many. The order of day preceding the night in Scripture is used 84 times compared to only 19 of the opposite, over 4 times as many. When determining a set period of time, for example, 40 days and 40 nights, which appears 11 times, the Scriptures always use the order of day and night. Why would the Scriptures record a count of days starting with the day if a day starts with a night? Notice the order of the natural processes that Yahweh has ordered. Genesis chapter 8 verse 22. As long as the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. This is what Yahweh has to say about the order of the day and night. Jeremiah chapter 33 verse 20 to 21. Thus said Yahweh, if you could break my covenant with the day, and my covenant with the night, so that there be not day and night in their season, then my covenant could also be broken. Continuing verse 25 to 26, thus said Yahweh, if my covenant is not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the laws of the Shamayim and the earth, then I would also reject the descendants of Yaakov. So far we have examined the Scriptures from which should come all our doctrine, but it is also interesting to delve into some of the studies of historians and commentaries which can confirm what we have read. Quote, the night time is considered as belonging to the preceding period of daylight. From this there developed the meaning of day in the sense of the cycle made up of one period of daylight and one period of darkness, or according to our modern reckoning, 24 hours. From the natural viewpoint, the 24-hour day begins at sunrise. However, beside this conception, there arose another idea of the 24-hour day, according to which this daily period began at sunset. It was no doubt the lunar calendar of the Jews which gave rise to this viewpoint. Although the earlier computation did not die out completely, the custom of considering the day as beginning at sunset became general in later Jewish times. Both these quotes from the Encyclopedic Dictionary of the Bible, page 497. There can be no doubt that in pre-exilic times the Israelites reckoned the day from morning to morning. The day began with the dawn and closed with the end of the night following it. Jacob Zalel Lauterbach, Rabbinic Essays, Cincinnati Hebrew Union College Press, 1951, page 446. To the light he gives the name day, to the darkness the name night. Thus the work of the first day, reckoned probably from morning to morning, is accomplished. The period of light is followed by evening and darkness, which comes to an end with the next morning, when the second day begins. Peake's Commentary on the Bible, page 136. In the Old Testament, the earlier practice seems to have been to consider that the day began in the morning. In Genesis 19:34, for example, the morrow, or the next day, clearly begins with the morning after the preceding night. Jack Finnegan, The Handbook of Bible Chronology, page 7 and 8. In earlier traditions, a day apparently began at sunrise. For example, Leviticus 7:15 to 17, Judges 19 verse 4 to 19. Later, its beginning was at sunset and its end at the following sunset. The system became normative and is still observed in Jewish tradition, where, for example, the Sabbath begins on Friday evening at sunset and ends Saturday at sunset. Oxford Companion to the Bible, page 744. That the custom of reckoning the day as beginning in the evening and lasting to the following evening was probably of late origin is shown by the phrase tarry all night, Judges 19 verse 6 to 9. The context shows that the day is regarded as beginning in the morning. In the evening the day declined, and until the new day, morning, arrived, it was necessary to tarry all night. Compare also Numbers 11 verse 32. International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. It is also interesting that according to the Karaite historian Al-Kirisan I, the dissident Meswi al-Akbari broke from traditional rabbinical Judaism in an attempt to get back to the original religion and began the reckoning of the day from sunrise. The itinerary of R. Benjamin of Tudela, 9, 5-8, Gruhut Adler, 1904, page 23. Among the Greeks, the day was reckoned from sunset to sunset. Handbook of Chronology, page 8. Among the ancient Israelites, as among the Greeks, the day was reckoned from sunset to sunset. This was the custom also of the Gauls and ancient Germans, and was probably connected originally with the cult of the moon. There is, however, evidence that this was not the custom at all times. Delitzsch in Dillman's commentary on Genesis 1:5. Early in the Old Testament period, when Canaan was under Egypt's influence, the day started at sunrise. Later, perhaps under Babylonian influence, the calendar seems to have changed. The day began at moonrise, 1800 hours, and a whole day became an evening and a morning. Lion Encyclopedia of the Bible, page 163. The Israelites, like the Babylonians, counted their days from sunset to sunset. NIV Study Bible, page 707. We know little about the old Israelite calendar, apart from the laws of the festivals, but the Mishnah, the collection of Jewish law made at the end of the 2nd century AD, fully describes a system which the Jews had worked out under Babylonian influence. Erdman's Handbook to the Bible. When the Jews returned to Palestine after their Babylonian exile, 516 BCE, they brought back with them the Babylonian astronomy and way of reckoning time. What is a Jew? Page 108. In order to fix the beginning and ending of the Sabbath day and festivals, and to determine the precise hour for certain religious observances, it became necessary to know the exact times of the rising and setting of the sun. According to the strict interpretation of the Mosaic law, every day begins with sunrise and ends with sunset. Jewish Encyclopedia, page 591 to 597. Days were reckoned from morning to morning. Following the reign of King Josiah, and especially after the Babylonian exile, a number of significant and enduring changes occurred in the Israelite calendar, showing that the Jews gradually adopted the Babylonian calendar of time. The 7-day week persisted, despite its failure to divide evenly either the month or the year. The day, however, was counted from evening to evening after the Babylonian fashion. New Catholic Encyclopedia, Volume 11, page 1068. So far as we know, the Babylonian calendar was at all periods truly lunar. The month began with the evening, when the new crescent was for the first time again visible shortly after the sunset. Consequently, the Babylonian day also begins in the evening. Exact Sciences in Antiquity, page 106. Numerous scholars have argued for the existence in Bible times of a sunrise method of day reckoning. The evidence for the sunrise reckoning is significant and cannot be ignored. The time of the crucifixion and resurrection, chapter 5. In Israel, the day was for a long time reckoned from morning to morning, and it was in fact the morning with the creation of light when the world began. The distinction of day and night, and time too, began on a morning. Genesis 1 verse 3 to 5. The opposite conclusion has been drawn from the refrain which punctuates the story of creation. There was an evening and there was a morning, the first, second, etc. day. This phrase, however, coming after the description of each creative work, which clearly happens during the period of light, indicates rather the vacant time till the morning, the end of a day, and the beginning of the next work. The change of reckoning must therefore have taken place between the end of the monarchy and the age of Nehemiah. This would bring us to the beginning of the exile. Ancient Israel, page 181 to 182. The first evening was not the gloom, which possibly preceded the full burst of light as it came forth from the primary darkness and intervened between the darkness and full broad daylight. It was not till after the light had been created and the separation of the light from the darkness had taken place that evening came, and after the evening, the morning. It follows from this that the days of creation are not reckoned from evening to evening, but from morning till morning. Commentary on the Old Testament, the first book of Moses, page 51. In early Jewish practice, it seems to have been customary to reckon the day from sunrise to sunrise, or rather from dawn to dawn. Thus the law for the praise offering, Leviticus 7:17, specifies that this sacrifice must be eaten on the day upon which it was offered, and that nothing may be left until morning. The repetition of the law in Leviticus 22 verse 30 is even more explicit. On that very day when it was sacrificed, it shall be eaten. You shall not leave anything of it until morning. Clearly the next morning is here reckoned as belonging to the next day, and not the same day as the preceding evening and night. In other words, the day is reckoned here from sunrise to sunrise. Likewise in Exodus 16 verse 19, the manna was given to the people in the morning, just at dawn, and before the sun had become warm. 16:21. It was to be eaten only on the day upon which it was gathered. Nothing was to remain over until the next morning. That which did so became foul. Here too the day seems to have been reckoned from dawn to dawn. From Matthew 28 verse 1 it may be inferred that the practice of reckoning the day from sunset to sunset was not universal in Israel, but in certain circles the older practice continued for several centuries. It is manifest that the day is still reckoned here from dawn to dawn. This is also the implication of the parallel passage, Mark 16 verse 1, Luke 23 verse 56, and 24 verse 1. Seems to imply the same. Finally, it is significant that in the Second Temple, throughout its entire existence, the practice seems to have been in all ritual matters to reckon the day from dawn to dawn, and not according to the latter practice from sunset to sunset. Even the rabbis who themselves reckoned the day from sunset to sunset and refused to admit the legitimacy of any other practice, or rather absolutely ignored all divergent practice, nonetheless had to admit the validity of the interpretation of Leviticus chapter 7 verse 15. The day was at one time reckoned from sunrise to sunrise. The earlier practice, which continued until the time of the secondary strata of the priestly code, was to reckon the day from dawn to dawn. The latter practice was to reckon the day from sunset to sunset. It is impossible to tell exactly when this change in the mode of reckoning of the day took place in Israel, and what causes brought it about. Possibly it may have had something to do with the introduction of the lunar calendar instead of the solar, for the lunar calendar naturally presupposes a reckoning of the day from nightfall to nightfall. It was possibly coincident with the revision of the festival calendar which took place in the period after the time of Ezra, and was, in all probability, the work of the Sepharim or of the Great Synod in the 4th century BC. This may also be inferred from the statement in the Talmud, Berachah 33a, that men of the Great Synod instituted the ceremonies of Kiddush and Havdalah, the solemn sanctification of the Sabbath on Friday Eve, and its equal solemn ushering out of the Saturday Eve. In other words, ceremonies specifically marking the beginning and close of the Sabbath as at sunset. These were ceremonies for the Jewish home instead of the temple. This, coupled with the fact that in the Second Temple the old system of reckoning the day from dawn to dawn continued to be observed, as we have seen, may perhaps indicate that this entire innovation was the work of an anti-priestly group or party in the Great Synod. The sources of the creation story, Genesis 1:1, 2-4, pages 169 to 212. A new stage in the investigation of the problem of the calendar of ancient Israel was marked by the appearance of a learned article by E. Koenig in 1906. He maintains that two distinct calendars were current in ancient Israel. The first, a solar calendar. The solar calendar was well adapted to the conditions of the simple agricultural life which the Israelites lived during the first period of their sojourn in Palestine. It reckons the day from sunrise. The second calendar was a lunar solar year. The day now came quite naturally to be reckoned from sunset. This second calendar was obviously based upon Babylonian models and was adopted under direct Babylonian influence at about 600 BC, when Babylonian religion and general agriculture began to affect with steadily increasing force the Jewish exiles in Babylonia and through those of them who returned from exile, the Jews who had remained in Palestine. This broadly sums up Koenig's conclusions. The time of the transition from the reckoning of the day as beginning with the morning to the reckoning of it as beginning with evening. That in the earlier calendar and in the literature which records this, the day was reckoned from the morning, presumably from sunrise, while in the later calendar and the literature pertaining thereto, the day was reckoned from the evening, must be eaten upon the day upon which it is sacrificed, and that nothing of it must be allowed to remain over until morning. Obviously, the implication here is that the next morning is no longer a part of the day upon which the sacrifice was offered, but mark the beginning of the next day. Elsewhere, we have presented quite a mass of evidence which establishes conclusively that the earlier practice in Israel during the biblical period was to reckon the day from sunrise to sunrise. That the earliest period of Israelite sojourn in Palestine under calendar 1, the day was reckoned from morning to morning, is established by a superabundance of evidence. This in turn, together with other important considerations, would point to a time approximately about the beginning or the first half of the 3rd century BC, as that the introduction of the new system of reckoning the day. Supplementary Studies in the Calendars of Ancient Israel, pages 1 to 148. It is interesting to note the wide variety of commentators who may not agree on many points of doctrine, but do agree that
this is why we stand on the day starting. This is why we at Rebirth, after looking at all the information, looking at the research, looking at the scriptures, we are able to conclude and honor the day starting at sunrise, and the Sabbath day being honored because he hallowed and sanctified that day, the 12-hour period. Hope this is enough. Just check it out, look at the information. Hope this was enough evidence for you. Line up on line, precept on precept again. This is Brother Tukor Malachi, Rebirth of a Nation. Awaken, restore, prepare. Shalom.